Danielle Colby is finally breaking her silence about Frank Fritz's departure from American Pickers. And trust me, fans are in for a real treat. After years of whispers and speculation, Danielle is stepping forward to set the record straight with raw emotion, powerful insights, and a behind-the-scenes look that's sure to surprise. She's pulling back the curtain on what really happened between Frank, Mike, and the show's evolution. For those who may not know, Danielle wasn't always a household name. Her journey started in 2010 when she became the heartbeat of the antique archaeology shop, holding things down while Mike and Frank traveled the country, hunting for hidden treasures. While the guys were out in the field, Danielle was the steady force back home, making sure everything ran smoothly, even if no one saw the behind-the-scenes hustle. Mike and Frank's dynamic was the driving force behind the show, with Mike as the dreamer and Frank as the detail-oriented collector. While Danielle wasn't out picking, she was always a key player in keeping the operation grounded and running efficiently. Their bond was evident from the start. As the show grew, Danielle watched it all unfold, knowing deep down that things were bound to change. And now, in this moment of truth, Danielle is finally sharing her unfiltered perspective on everything that's happened, giving us a rare peek behind the curtain of American Pickers like never before. But Danielle wasn't just a bystander. She was an integral part of managing the growing pains that came with American Pickers' skyrocketing fame. As the show's popularity soared, the dynamics between Mike and Frank began to shift. Mike was pushing for fresh ideas, while Frank preferred a slower, more methodical pace. Danielle found herself in the middle of it all, brainstorming with Mike, checking in on Frank, and trying to keep the peace as the show's success began to take on a life of its own. The rise of the show was nothing short of a phenomenon. What started as a small, somewhat shaky production quickly became a cultural juggernaut. Mike had always been the one to push for success, dragging Frank through barns and alleys in search of hidden gems. Meanwhile, Danielle was the quiet force behind the scenes, tracking down leads, organizing chaotic schedules, and keeping everything running smoothly. After years of rejection, the History Channel finally took a chance on the show in 2010, and the rest is history. 3.1 million viewers tuned in for that very first episode. Danielle's once quiet shop in LeClaire became a must-see destination, and soon fans recognized her on the street. The sudden rise to fame was exciting, but also overwhelming. Danielle had to hire extra help just to manage the influx of attention. Yet, through all the chaos, Mike and Frank kept calling her, each time eager to share the latest treasures they had uncovered. Those calls, those moments, were what made all the madness worth it. But Frank had his own moments of glory too. One day, he found an old fire extinguisher and acted as if he'd struck gold. Danielle couldn't help but laugh as she prepped the shop for the next quirky treasure. However, those days of easy picking were starting to feel like they were in the rearview mirror. Filming 250 days a year with long hours on the road was starting to take its toll. Danielle could hear the exhaustion creeping into Mike and Frank's voices during their calls. They were tired, no denying it, but they kept pushing forward. The thrill of the open road was slowly being replaced by the grind of it all. Fame hit everyone differently. Mike fully embraced it, opening a new shop in Nashville that quickly exploded in popularity. Danielle couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. On the other hand, Frank shied away from the spotlight, choosing to stay low-key in Illinois. Danielle teased him, calling him the quiet star, but it was clear how they balanced each other. Mike loud, driven, and always reaching for the stars, while Frank was calm, reserved, and grounded. On screen, their dynamic was perfect, with Danielle as the steady presence behind it all. As Danielle's own fanbase grew, she enjoyed the attention. Her tattoos, unique style, and burlesque flair made her a fan favorite. But with the rise in popularity came changes behind the scenes that she couldn't ignore. The show was no longer just a fun adventure. It had turned into a high-stakes production with large crews, tight schedules, and mounting pressure. By 2015, The cost per episode had skyrocketed by $250,000. Mike pushed for bigger and more impressive finds to keep the audience captivated, while Frank just wanted to keep it real. The small disagreements over this shift would echo through the shop. Danielle tried to stay out of it, focusing on what she could control, the shop. She remained the calm in the chaos, the anchor they could always rely on. American Pickers had grown into a nationwide sensation, but Danielle knew firsthand that fame brought its own set of challenges. By 2017, she could sense something was off. The pressure of the show's success was weighing heavily on everyone. While Mike was fully invested, she could hear the stress in his voice. Each episode needed to be a showstopper, and it was starting to wear them all down. Frank's calls grew less frequent, and when he did call, he sounded drained. Danielle knew his ongoing battle with Crohn's disease was taking a toll on him. His stomach was constantly in pain, and it was only getting worse. Though he never talked much about it, Danielle would check in, and he'd always respond with a simple, "Yeah, just tired," before quickly changing the subject. She didn't push him. Frank was always a private guy like that. But it was getting harder to ignore. The crew noticed Frank was missing more days, and when he did show up, he looked worn out. Fans started to notice too, asking, "Where's Frank lately?" Danielle would smile and tell them he was out picking, but she could feel the weight behind the question. The truth was, Frank's body simply couldn't keep up anymore. Then, one day, Frank snapped. He called, upset about something Mike had said. "He's turning this into a circus," Frank complained. Danielle tried to stay neutral, attempting to calm him down, but Frank abruptly hung up. She didn't mention it to Mike. It wasn't her fight, but the tension was palpable. She began to wonder if the rift between Frank and Mike had grown too wide to repair. Through it all, Danielle kept the shop running smoothly, acting like everything was fine. Fans never saw the strain. The episodes still looked great, Mike and Frank laughing, finding treasures, but Danielle knew the truth. It was all edited. She'd watch the episodes and think, that's not the whole story. But she stayed silent, choosing to stay out of the drama. Mike would stop by with new ideas, but Frank? He didn't visit much anymore. Danielle missed the days when they were all together. By 2019, it was clear that something significant was coming. Frank's health was deteriorating. He missed more shoots, and the crew scrambled to adjust. Mike kept pushing, but Danielle could hear the frustration in his voice. "I wish Frank was here," he'd say. The show was a machine, and it wasn't going to slow down for anyone. Danielle could feel trouble building, but there was nothing she could do to fix it. Then, in March 2020, everything changed. Frank's last episode aired, and Danielle found out from Mike. "Frank's done," Mike said quietly. Danielle didn't ask for details. She could tell by the way Mike said it that he was down. She had seen this coming, but it still hit hard. Frank had been there from the very start, and now the show would never feel the same again. Later, Frank spoke out, saying he hadn't talked to Mike in 2 years, blaming both his health struggles and Mike's lack of support. Danielle didn't fully buy that version of events. She had seen Mike rearrange shoots to accommodate Frank, but she understood why Frank felt that way. He was in pain, and perhaps he needed more than just a few schedule adjustments. Danielle didn't reach out to Frank. She wasn't the type to get involved in that kind of drama. As fans began to question Frank's departure online, Danielle remained quiet, focused on keeping the shop running and posting about vintage treasures. She didn't want to take sides. Mike had always been her buddy, but so had Frank. She hated that he was gone. She'd check in with Mike asking, "How's it going?" He'd reply with a simple, "We're managing." She never asked about Frank. It felt too raw. The truth was messy, and there was so much more to it than anyone knew. Frank's battle with Crohn's had taken a brutal toll. 17 hospital trips in 2 years, plus rehab for alcohol in 2020. Danielle didn't think Frank was a screw-up. She knew that pain could change people. Danielle often thought back to the days when Frank would get excited over a find. His energy was contagious. That version of Frank was fading, and it was hard to watch. Mike kept filming, bringing in new faces to fill the void. The episodes were still good, but they didn't feel the same. Danielle missed Frank's vibe, even if he'd been grumpy toward the end. 2020 brought its own chaos, with the pandemic disrupting everything. The shop was still busy, and fans kept asking about Frank. Danielle would tell them, "He's taking a break," keeping it vague. She didn't want to lie, but she didn't have the full story either. Mike posted online, calling Frank his brother and expressing how much he'd miss him. Danielle knew Mike meant it, but Frank's words still echoed in her mind. He'd felt like second place to Mike, like the backup. By 2021, it was clear Frank wasn't coming back. Danielle stayed silent, watching the drama unfold without picking a side. She had enough to deal with running the shop and managing her own life. But in July 2021, Danielle broke her silence with a powerful post on Instagram. Fans had been demanding answers about Frank's departure, and Danielle wanted to clear the air. She explained that she was saddened by Frank's struggles, but it wasn't about a fight. It was about concern for him. "Frank caused so much pain for himself that it has been hard to watch," she wrote. She wasn't angry, just deeply concerned. She wanted him to get better, offering hope and compassion, not gossip. Danielle even called out tabloids for twisting her words, making it clear that she wasn't stirring up drama. She was speaking out to end the speculation. She didn't want to cause a stir, she just wanted to share what she knew. "I hope everybody gets well." Danielle's post cleared up the rumors but didn't reveal everything. She sided with Mike, who'd always had her back, but she still cared about Frank. Fans could piece together the rest. It wasn't a big reveal, just the truth as she saw it. Life went on. Danielle kept the shop running, Mike kept picking, and the questions about Frank faded. However, whispers from the crew said Frank's health was declining. Danielle didn't reach out, thinking Frank needed space, but she hoped he'd pull through. Her post silenced the noise, but the emotional weight lingered. Mike kept the show going, and Danielle supported him, even as the silence between her and Frank grew. It wasn't just drama. It was real pain, felt long after Frank's departure. Danielle's honest post reshaped the narrative. Instead of fueling rumors, she highlighted the true struggles of friendship and health. Frank's departure wasn't about personal vendettas, but health challenges. Mike's continued support, despite the distance, showed the bond they shared. Danielle's openness about Frank's illness made me see the situation differently. It wasn't about jealousy, but years of strain and pain. She didn't point fingers, but called for understanding and compassion, offering a more nuanced view. This story is a reminder that the toughest battles are often unseen.